We're going to begin. So what I will ask, because of the acoustics in here, I'll ask all of the presenters to please do your best to keep the microphone in front of your face as close to your mouth as possible, because the minute you start talking over here, you hear that it can't hear me. So you all have such incredible knowledge and precious information. Anthony, this is for you in particular. You must keep the microphone not down here, but up in front of your face so that we can hear and get the information. So then that way it'll inform us of what questions we have, because then we will have heard what you had to say. All right. So we'll start this session with Mark, Professor of Psychiatry and Neuroscience, Emeritus at the University of California, San Diego, UCD. Mark.
I guess, is this on? Good, now. I think I have control of the slides. Where's Mirto? We can't do anything without Mirto. There we go. Well, first I want to thank the organizers and Uwe for introducing me to this conference, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come experience this entire symposium and the site at Eleusis and everything about this has been wonderful for me. I want to kind of try to bring you up to date as to how we got to this current revolution of the use of psychedelics in a variety of clinical contexts. It didn't happen by accident. Whether or not there were psychedelics involved in the rituals that we've heard so much about here, that's a speculation, a hypothesis. The fact is, there were certainly transformative experiences occurring, and for me, I've long been fascinated in transformative experiences, and one way to induce them as a scientist and study them is by the use of psychedelics. So I want to kind of describe for you how we got past the impasse, beyond the impasse that prevented research on psychedelics for so long, and how we got to where we are today. So by way of introduction, I certainly am an American, but I've had a lot of experience coming to Greece since 1985. And this is our house in the foot of Mount Pelion, which reputedly does have a cave in it, which reputedly was occupied by Chiron, who was the friendly centaur that helped us begin pharmacology by teaching Asclepius the art of extracting medicinal properties from plant materials. Humans have used plant materials for many centuries in a variety of contexts, mostly sacramental contexts. You've already heard about, from Tony, much of the history of this. The main ones have been psilocybin mushrooms, DMT-containing ayahuasca, mescaline-containing peyote, and potentially, hypothetically, it's suggested that the ritualistic experience here, the transformative experience here, and the mysteries involved the ergot fungus that grows on barley, wheat, rye, and has precursors to compounds that are related to LSD. And it has been suggested that maybe the powers that be learned how to concentrate the ergot and add that to the barley mixture in the kykeon and help induce this transformative experience that we call among the mysteries of this splendid place that we've been visiting. Triptolemos, I'm not doing justice to the name, I think, but my pronunciation, was one of the kind of the demigods, as I understand it, of Eleusis. He was credited with inventing the plow and agriculture. And he's known for sowing barley and wheat and other grasses in the plains of Greece, and was the son of Eleusis. The kikian, this ritual drink, was consumed after this trek that we heard about and mimicked a little bit this morning, after fasting, and was made, one of the main ingredients was barley, which could easily be infected by the ergot fungus, which contains ergotamine and a number of other chemicals. And we have some chemists in the audience who are studying how that could have produced the water-soluble compounds that could have psychedelic or entheogenic effects. I'll go briefly through the early research. Arthur Hefter identified mescaline as the active chemical in the peyote cactus in 1897, and German pharmacologist tradition is to taste the compound to see if you're correct. He did that. And it was used and considered a possible way to understand things about naturally occurring psychotic events and illnesses. In 1938, Albert Hofmann synthesized LSD as one of LSD-25, as one of a whole series of compounds. And for what he considered mystical reasons, he went back to that one compound in the whole series 5 years later, resynthesized it, and uncharacteristic for a careful Swiss chemist, accidentally ingested some. 3 days later, he said, well, that was interesting, so I'll try a very, very low dose. The strategy is start low and build up. He took the equivalent of about 2.5 normal doses and had quite an experience. Rode his bicycle home, needed a little help with that. He wrote about the famous bicycle ride, and we still celebrate Bicycle Day on April 19th. Those of us in the psychedelic community share emails congratulating ourselves on Bicycle Day. Sandoz, the chemical company, the pharmaceutical company that Albert worked for, marketed LSD as a compound called Eleusis, but he also later identified the active ingredient in psilocybin, in mushrooms, as being psilocybin, and Sandoz also marketed that as an aid to psychotherapy. Albert did that in 1958 or 9, and there was some research in Switzerland, especially in Zurich, that using this compound as a way to understand phenomena of schizophrenia and as a model psychosis. I got into this area when I was a freshman in college and went to a lecture by Aldous Huxley. Tony mentioned the wonderful Aldous Huxley. And it was the year later he died after having an IV or IM injection of 250 micrograms of LSD. He was on his deathbed and he knew he wanted to go out in style. And Laura gave him the injection, and he liked it so much he said, well, give me another one. So he had 500 micrograms to leave this earth. It's a variation on palliative care, I guess. So he died later that year, the same day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. It was a turbulent time, but that day and that event influenced my life for sure. I became fascinated with this way of a little tiny chemical transforming one's consciousness and altering it in such fantastic ways. So I got involved in research on the brain and psychedelics in particular. We didn't have that word then very well established, but no sooner did I get into the field than the field was shut down in many ways. So because of the Vietnam War and a lot of turbulence, Richard Nixon banned rescheduled all of the psychedelics hallucinogens we had to call them then, or psychotomimetics we had to call them. So we couldn't really do much research. Almost no human research was done for a long time. But there were several of us who were doing animal research because you could do animal research to do the basic neuroscience studies. Sasha Shulgin was one of the most famous medicinal chemists and still is. He brought MDMA back into the fold and invented hundreds and hundreds of compounds, published 2 books with all the syntheses, had a little club of people up in San Francisco that got together and he would try them and they would try. And he wrote these books with all the syntheses and everything. And companies today are using Sasha's compound books as guides to new drugs. So we'll see what happens with that. A pivotal year in the history of psychedelic research was 1993. Switzerland was continuing to use LSD as a psychotherapeutic agent. There was a whole society, the Psychedelic Society, that was using it. There was a quiet little meeting in south of Switzerland, invitation only for people involved with LSD research, paid for by Sandoz, on the 50th anniversary of Albert's first real experience. And at that meeting, they said, you've got to prove that you have an efficacious compound. You, the Psychedelic Society, and the psychiatrists in Switzerland. You have no demonstration of efficacy. They didn't really want to do that because they were such believers in the efficacy of this psychotherapeutic aid. But it did then prompt a shutdown, in a way, of some of the clinical uses that had been ongoing and traditional. But that kind of revitalized things. So I met a number of people. Efrosini Gazoulis was a Greek who I met there, who's a German psychiatrist, and a number of other people, including Albert and his wife. The other thing that happened that year was the development of the Hefter Research Institute. A bunch of us that were doing research on psychedelics.
Closer to your...
Okay, thank you, sorry. A number of us doing research on psychedelics academically thought there's no future in this because there's no career path. And we wanted to kind of rehabilitate psychedelic research because it had a real bad rap from rather careless studies in the 60s and 70s, early 70s. So Dave Nichols and I, and Dennis McKenna in particular, wanted to create a research institute that would do credible, mainstream scientific research on psychedelics to be able to launch this or continue this line of investigation that we thought was quite important. So we met at Mount Baldy at a Zen Center in '93. Dave Nichols is here in the middle. The little laser pointer doesn't work very well. The tall guy in the middle was Dave Nichols. Next to him, toward me, was Charlie Grove, a colleague of Tony's that's doing the palliative care work. And on the far end, you'd mentioned Phil had mentioned the Native American Church and the peyote effort and the effort to get that legalized. Well, Jerry Patchen was one of the attorneys that worked so hard to accomplish that approval of the practice by the Native American Church. Phil Wilson was, yes.
Well, I just want to offer you an opportunity to maybe wrap up a little bit about what you're sharing so that we can get to everyone, and then we'll come back again to hear more. Is that okay?
I was told 30 minutes, but sorry.
Well,
I can do nothing.
Go ahead. I mean, I'm doing my best to moderate so that we all have an opportunity to participate. But I saw the timer go off, and that's why. But please.
Well, okay, I'll try to.
But I know
have
it's
to think about
jarring.
that. Okay, this is Albert and me and Dave and Franz Vollenweider, who's the leader of human research on on psychedelics. Trying to think of what things to skip. Most of it. I'll skip forward to the clinical part.
Great. That would be awesome. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
It's a little surprising, but anyway. So, there's a whole lot of intervening information that I can't share with you right now, but Hefter did a good job of making credible research on psychedelics, publishing in premier journals in order to get enough credibility that we could lead to investigations of this compound, of these compounds in clinical applications. So you've already heard about Roland Griffith's first study of documenting the mystical experiences by normal, healthy subjects administered psilocybin. And that led to a number of possible clinical applications, some of which have led to now psilocybin being fast-tracked for the treatment of treatment-resistant depression on one hand, and another indication is existential anxiety, palliative care application. But some of the most impressive results with, these are the original clinical studies that in patients, but some of the most impressive studies that were done in a way are these two, where, because nicotine addiction is a very difficult thing to treat, but in a very easily operationalized, measurable phenomenon. And psilocybin has been demonstrated to have a remarkable ability, taken on the quit day, to have a sustained, long-lasting aid in the cessation of cigarette consumption. And that is now supported by a grant from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. The other indication that Tony mentioned is alcoholism, and it's also difficult to treat. And that has also been shown at Johns Hopkins group to, Michael Bogenschutz in New York, as well as also Hefter supported, to 1 or 2 administrations of psilocybin with intention to stop consuming alcohol has shown remarkable efficacy. And about 10 days ago, I think, Michael was awarded a $3.8 million grant to further develop this clinical study. There's a long backstory there that's of some interest, but maybe over coffee sometime you can hear that. And in UCSD, we've started a center. There are about 4 or 5 centers within the University of California for psychedelic research now, and we're trying to put them all together. And we have a study ongoing in phantom limb pain, for which there's really no treatment. I just got an email last night from one of the amputees that got over his phantom limb pain by self-induced psilocybin treatment, and we're going to have funding now. We've been testing amputees with phantom limb pain, and the email last night he got from a patient that was in the study, he said, for the first time he got a full night's sleep for the first time since the amputation after 1 treatment with psilocybin. So I'll close with that, and thanks for your attention, and sorry for the confusion.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm actually going to also divert for 1 second, a very quick question for you. those studies that were done with psilocybin for the research for alcoholism or to help addiction, how long is a session? Like one session, how long? Because you said in one it was 2.
A session, we chose psilocybin because it's fairly short acting. So it's only 4 to 6 hours. If you had LSD, had we chosen LSD for all of this work, you'd have to keep the subject in overnight, which is, as an academic setting, that's pretty expensive. So it's one, usually 6-hour session.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll return back to hear more of their backstory. And just also for everyone to know, we're going to move through this panel so that everyone can have a deeper understanding of who's here, what we're talking about. We're going to break for lunch, and then we're going to come back and be in dialogue and conversation. The schedule changed a bit, and I'm sorry that you were not previously informed, which is upsetting, and I'm sorry. It's upsetting for me too. But we will, it's because of traffic and time, and so, but we will come back. Just trust that. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay, please.
Thank you. So it's good to be back again, and thank you very much for the invitation and for this amazing meeting and event. I would like very briefly to introduce the European Brain Foundation because we're trying to establish some kind of collaboration, and maybe next year we might have a joint event on brain and art. I'm glad to be a member of the board of directors, and it's also very, it's affiliated with the European Brain Council that you might know, that is very strong with advocacy work and brain awareness, especially about psychiatric and neurological diseases, but also psychedelics. And also we have established in Greece the Hellenic Brain Council, the National Brain Council. So we're back here, and I'm very happy about it. I'll try to tell you what's next, what happened in this year. And of course, now I don't have to talk about what are the classical psychedelics. It was already introduced, and all the history. Just to let you know, for those that are not aware, there is a book in Greek from the University Crete office, press office, and where we explain also about the psychedelics and other drugs, medicines, you can call them as you wish. So recently, again, there is a lot of publicity around psychedelics. I just chose very few things about the effect they have on the brain and the experience. We already heard about it, but also palliative care has gained some attention, and that's very important. Even in Greece, there are some articles nowadays written about the possible use of psychedelics in palliative care. And one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and I just also read about it, we're not involved in this kind of studies, but I know that psychedelics can also affect the immune system. You see that they can decrease some cytokines, they can decrease interleukin-6, which is also decreased with dance, actually, and other experiences. But they can also increase cortisol, which is the stress hormone, during the experience. So that's why maybe we need some guidance and some preparation for this important experience, because we also, I promise to talk about the risks as well, so we should speak only about the positive, but also some risks and maybe potential adverse effects. Also, if you are interested, there is a video online, it's 1 hour, it's in Greek, and it was from a recent event that we had. Yiannis was there, and Anthony also was online with us. And it's good because there is some awareness lately in Greece. That's a study that was very recently published, and it gained a lot of attention as well. And it's very important to see how nowadays scientists are really starting to understand about the altered states of mind, of consciousness, and how this could really help, if you can read there, the maladaptive patterns of thought. That's something very difficult to treat, especially with psychiatric patients, as you heard before and you will hear after. And this is, I don't know, can we play this video? It's on the left at the top. There was a small video from, yes, that's from The Guardian. It's for that study that I showed you before that was published at Nature. So it shows the brain of a participant before and during and after psilocybin. Okay, that's with an MRI, a functional magnetic, like an imaging technique. And you see that psilocybin can desynchronize the human brain, and this can last for weeks. Also, it can cause ego dissolution, that we already heard that it can happen with meditation, and it's something that many people really need, to have dissolution of their ego. And this, actually, when I read about the study, it reminded me of a very classical experiment that had happened in the 50s. And I thought you would mention it. I'm sure you remember it. We used to teach this at the pharmacology classes about the effects of LSD. So there was an artist that drew himself while he was on LSD. And I used it at my class to show how long the pharmacokinetics of LSD, how long LSD acts in the brain. But it's very nice to see how his image was altered. So he could himself as a different, not really as a face or a person, after a few hours of LSD, and then it came back again. So I think it's very impressive. It's from the 50-something. Also, what I realized lately is that we don't talk much about the mechanism of action of these drugs. It was already mentioned that they act on serotonin and on the 5-HT, the serotonergic receptor. It's a protein in our brain where serotonin, which is a chemical in our brain, goes and acts. It's like the key opens a lock and it opens a door. And, but also there are other neurotransmitters in the synapses. The synapse is this thing that you see in the circle, where the nerves communicate with each other. So in the way, it's their way to talk, to pass the signal from one neuron to the other, the one neuronal cell to the other. They release this chemical, serotonin. And the 5-HT that you can see there. But also there is dopamine involved, another chemical in our brain, another neurotransmitter, very important for pleasure and for addiction, and also glutamate. And for us, this is something that we really want to understand. It's something that we do in our lab. We measure neurotransmitters in various tissues and fluids. And you can see here serotonin, the 5-HT, dopamine, glutamate, and others. Also, we know that psychedelics promote plasticity, and we talked about that last year. And there are some new evidence that the psychedelics can make our neurons flourish. You can see at this picture there is, so the vehicle is the control with nothing. The LSD is LSD, and the PSI is the psilocybin. And you can see how the neurons are becoming, they have more like a tree that is flourishing and has more branches. And, but this is also very close to what we are doing so many years in the lab, and what I did before with Tracy Source, that she explained yesterday in her amazing talk. And we were always trying to understand neuroplasticity, and neurogenesis is part of neuroplasticity. And so this is something that I started getting involved many years ago in 2005, when I was at her lab in New Jersey at Rutgers University. But since then, when I became a PI in my lab in Athens, at the University of Athens, we are also trying to understand what chronic stress and some diseases can do in the brain. And you can see here again that with antidepressant treatment and with other procedures, we can again increase the synaptic plasticity in a way and enhance the branches of the neurons on the left after chronic mild stress in rats. And also, I know this is a complicated graph, don't get upset, but I just wanted to show that we can also reverse behavioral effects. So we have a model that will make our rats in a way anhedonic. They don't want to get any pleasure. They don't want to drink sucrose because rats love sucrose. So with this chronic mild stress model, there is a decrease in sucrose intake. So you can see this decrease in red. And then when we have some treatments like fluoxetine, which is Prozac in the States, Lados in Greece, like classical antidepressant, this can be reversed. But we also reverse that with other pharmacological ways. That's not a psychedelic. It's a thing that we are doing in the lab, a research that we are performing with my student, Pavlina Pavlidou. It's an agonist, actually, of estrogen in the brain. And we find that this can reverse also the depressive behavior. But also lately, with a collaboration with Portugal and also with Dr. Sotiropoulos at Democritus, we find that also psilocybin is doing that. Of course, we're not the first that they found that. Many other labs have done that. But also, we are finding that neurogenesis is important for this process. So the rats really need to have this neuroplasticity and neurogenesis in order to have this effect of psilocybin to reverse the stress effects. I hope next year we'll have more. This is in collaboration with Dr. Luisa Pinto. So we have applied for 2 big grants lately in order to study all this more, one at the Ministry of Education and one at the Ministry of Development, Research and Development. And it's in collaboration with the University of Ioannina, with Democritus, University of Crete, also with Professor Skaltsounis at the Pharmacy Department, the bottom one. So we are optimistic for the future, and we hope we'll get our funding to continue our research. And finishing, I just want to finish with I think I mentioned last year that we are also a member of this psychedelic network from the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology in Europe. And we just had a conference at Milan last weekend. And we're applying also for cost action. It's a grant for networking, and it's a small grant in order to apply for bigger grant, European big grants. And also we're applying next year for an Horizon European big, something like 14 million grant, multi-center. And they already told me that they need the psychiatric clinic of Greece of Athens to be involved, and of course the lab. And we have 2 recent papers with this network. For those that are in the field of psychedelics, they're a bit technical. And with that, I would like to thank you all, to also advertise a big our conference for next year at Crete. It's the Mediterranean Neuroscience Society Conference. You are all welcome there. I have the honor to be the president and the chair of that conference, and I promise that we'll have a lot of symposium, many talks on psychedelics, cannabinoids, and other very interesting things in pharmacology and psychopharmacology, psychiatry and neuroscience. And I would like to thank also the group, my students, of course, and also Dr. Nikos Stefanis, that we work together in many of these things in the lab, and Dr. Sotiropoulos, and our funding sources in Greece and abroad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christina. Nikos.
It's my turn, right?
Chairman, First Department of Psychiatry, National and
Kapodistrian.
University of Athens. Thank you.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for being over here. Thank you, the organizers. Alexandra, thank you so much for the invitation. As I scrambled through the slides that I wanted to show you today, I was wondering what is the essential message that I would like to send to all of you regarding psychedelics from the psychiatric point of view. So, modern psychiatry is very interested in the action of psychedelics. There is a huge expansion of interest in research, in big pharma, in all aspects that have to do with application, the potential application of psychedelics into psychiatric disorders. And that's why my talk basically, if I had a title, would be From Stigmatization to Expectation, just portraying the change in attitude that has happened into a rather conservatory environment, which is the academic psychiatric environment. Who would imagine, when I was a young psychiatrist, that we had potentially at our interest the possibility of thinking of psilocybin, LSD, as potential medicines for people who have psychiatric disorders. So this is a real prospect nowadays, and you heard a bit about it. This is the expansion of research studies that has happened the last decade. Look where the peak is around 2020. I mean, it's an exponential increase in interest. Two are the major players. So if there's going to be a psychedelic medicine available out there, it has to go through these two huge organizations. One is the FDA, the other one is the European, is the EMA. So they are the controllers of everything that will be released if any such medicine is approved in the near or later future. And there are a lot of stringent requirements for pharmaceutical companies, for universities, to submit an application with the results of the studies for them to be approved by these two major organizations. This is where we are. For this example, the FDA. These are the fast-tracking breakthrough destination, as they've been called, attempts to fast-track the process by which medications, psychedelic medications, are possibly going to be getting into the market. And look at this. I mean, we have psilocybin by Compass Pathways, Usona Institute, Mind Medicine, Cybin, all competing at this point for being the first pharmaceutical company that will bring a psychedelic medicine into the market. You can find the slides, you can find the positions of Big Pharma, you can find the positions of the law people who were there, you can find the positions of everything. It was a very synthetic meeting, it lasted one day, and the objective was, let's look at how we can improve and prepare for the new era of psychedelic medication. What do we need to do better in order to ensure this medication comes to our country? So from 1st of January 2025, there are new rules of how a medication has to be implemented over here in clinical practice. So in order for us at the university to conduct a study, we have to follow the EMA new rules of how these studies are conducted. And these rules are summarized over here, and I thank my colleague Nikos Stefanis for preparing this and sort of giving an awareness of what are the steps. It's a very laborious process to conduct a clinical study, high clinical level studies that will enable a company, for example, or a university to be able to process the information to EMA in order to get approval. So you need a sponsor. That's where we begin. Sponsor needs, that means money. Means somebody who will invest in a product that he feels has a potential for the market, for the benefit of the people. You need a sponsor. You need an application submission that you have to make this to the Clinical Trials Information System, that is the CTIS. So you submit your application of this trial, you have your design in mind, all the parameters, you submit that application to the CTIS. But before you do that, you need a manufacturer who will be able to identify his product and give the reassurance that this product is able to be given to humans without any danger. That is the famous ART57 database. So you have the sponsor, you have the application submission, and you have to have the ART57 database where you submit the actual product itself. It's a complicated process. I will not go into it. Just mind you to say that when it comes to clinical trials, Rudy, we would all want to have clinical trials over here, right? We do want to have clinical trials. We have to follow the rules. The sponsor selects a clinical research organization or a clinical research associate. They both combine, they create the protocol, and they start the clinical trial. Unfortunately, in Greece, Greek universities or hospitals do not have such infrastructure in place. So you are heavily dependent on the outside sponsor and the funding to do that. This is the MEMA's multi-stakeholder workshop on psychedelics that I was telling you about that took place in April. It summarizes all the stakeholders' impressions, submissions about what should we be doing to improve our methods of clinical trials in order to get approval. And there were 4 points that were raised. I think these are very important because in academic understanding, you need good trials. You need good trials to submit those good trials to provide evidence that your product is better than placebo, right? So that is the way that which you would make your submission to these basic organizations. There are problems that we need to face and improve on. Huge issue, the placebo effect. As you previously heard, you compare the effect of a medication, of a psychedelic, to control. What is the control? It's a pill that does nothing. Placebo, right? And you measure the difference. The patient doesn't know what he took. The doctor who gave the medication doesn't know what the patient took. It's double-blinded, right? What is the problem? If you follow the rules, and the rules are the randomized, you go to A group, you go to B group, you go to C group. The randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials is the way to conduct the studies, right? But there is a Michael Pollan effect, which we feel is bad for science. And we feel that is bad for science because it inflates the difference between the actual results when you take the psychedelic medication and the actual results you get from the people who take the placebo. And why do you inflate these differences? You inflate it because there is a huge expectation from the people who take the psychedelic that they will become better. That's called a bias in our kind of language. And this beautiful study, published in Nature, which almost gave Lykos its license to go to the FDA and claim that they are the first company that will achieve and bring to the market a psychedelic medication, published in Nature. But Lykos didn't manage to get the approval. And it did not manage to get the approval because the FDA understood or thought that there was a lot of bias involved in these studies when controlling, for example. But if you look at who thought they took ketamine and who thought they took placebo, the people who thought that they took ketamine did much, much better. So just thinking that you took something, expectational bias was important and destroyed the study. There are ways to go about these problems. I will not go into it because I have a ban in 2 minutes. The other concerns is about safety and adverse events. It's an unknown field. We know about adverse events, but not to the extent that would satisfy big organizations like FDA and EMA anymore. And obviously, the last thing is the setting and psychological support, psychotherapy that goes along with giving this medication. What are the rules of these psychotherapeutic, supportive, for many hours sessions? Everybody seems to have his own rules. We need to standardize those rules because we don't know how to disentangle the effect of the psychedelic medication from the effect of the psychotherapeutic support. We need to standardize this process. So these are issues, current issues of importance. I see that I have exceeded my time limit. I thank you for your understanding.
Thank you.
Your understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As we all see and know, there's so much to discuss. There's so much knowledge. There's so much wisdom that we want to extract as much as we possibly can, but we want to give as much fair time as we can. So, okay, Yiannis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yiannis. Thank you to the World Human Forum team for inviting me and organizing all this. I came here with the property of being the co-founder of the Greek Psychedelic Society. I'm the non-specialist in this group of esteemed scientists, which makes it a little bit daunting to be up here. I came into the field of psychedelics through reading some experiential perspectives, and I realized very early that there was a big gap in the Greek, internet, to say the least, but also discussions with regards to these medicines, the recent trials that have happened, or the advances in psychedelic medicine, but most importantly, sober, calm, harm reduction information. Because even though those substances are meant to be done in a clinical environment, under supervision, or at least a controlled environment, we know very well from the 60s and onwards that this is not the case. As Tony said before, they're very multifaceted tools. They can be used for healing, they can be used for exploration, can also be used for fun sometimes. Since they are used for fun, we wanted to have some information online for the people that, against all advice, will intend to explore them on their own. And that was sort of the first leg of the mission of the society. Over time, and as you know, I was growing up and finding more community in the UK where I currently reside, I realized how fundamental the community aspect is for people that are working with these medicines, whether it be in a strictly therapeutic aspect, underground, or taking them in festivals to have fun. Going through such deep, transformative, or sometimes chaotic experiences, and then trying to return to your everyday life with people that cannot resonate with them, like having your whole reality destroyed and your whole ego dissolved, and then have to go back to the office, is daunting, to say the least, and leaves people sometimes in a very vulnerable state. And that is why we have started recently trying to do some community actions to bring people that are exploring these things together, and not together under sort of an umbrella of the Greek Psychedelic Society. Find each other, form your own networks, support each other, because it is essential. And it's essential in general, even outside of psychedelics. It's something that our society really has forgotten. As other pillar of action that we have, it's general destigmatization about the use of psychoactive substances, because this is something that has been going on forever as far as humanity is concerned. We always sought to alter our consciousness with plants, with activities, with a lot of things. And the failed war on drugs that started has just been a very, very small parenthesis in our history, yet us, all here, take it as a granted. We all grew up in an era of prohibition, and people that have used those substances have been heavily stigmatized. So that, along with promoting the research and trying to bring these modalities to the forefront with the appropriate respect that they deserve, so we always try to emphasize the science and try to stick there. We believe that is a paramount mission. On top of all these, something that I wanted to talk about, since Gina talked about recreational use, is that for the last 4 years in the UK where I reside, I've been volunteering at music festivals. I go to like 4 to 8 festivals every summer, where I'm part of an organization called Psychiatry, which spun out of Cosmic Care that was born in Boom Festival. We are on the front line of psychedelic crisis management, essentially. It's psychedelic first aid. We form a very nice, cozy, welcoming space. We put down pillows, we put decoration, floral, tapestries, everything, and make it a place where somebody, even if they didn't have an emergency, would find it very, very pleasant to spend their time there. Once I discovered that these services exist, I cannot believe that some festivals simply just go without having them, just with a small team of paramedics, and that's it. And it's a very, very interesting environment, because we do see things there that you probably will never have seen in the lab, from multi-drug use to, people ceasing their antipsychotics in order for the drugs to work, which yeah, it happens. And yeah, that furthermore has emphasized the need for, first of all, information, but yeah, as I said, community and a support network for people that will go far and need to come back to consensus reality and integrate everything that has gone through. Unfortunately, our society currently does not really have all those dogmes in English, structures, thank you very much, bilingual, so you know how it goes. But yeah, that is something that we strive to at least influence in order to be able to someday have them here in Greece, whether it's festivals or just, community centers that people can go and find support. I'm probably the only one that is sort of before their time, so if you have any particular comment or something else you would want me to expand on?
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that there is a space at festivals for young people, in particular any age person who is experiencing, especially a psychedelic for the first time. Sometimes there's encouraged peer pressure, nothing bad necessarily.
Very true.
And, young people want to try. I mean, I've been to Coachella in the United States many times, and I've seen many young people, predominantly on Molly at the festivals, but, to have a safe space to decompress and to move through. My daughter had a very interesting experience with marijuana chocolate once, very young, not knowing that she was taking out of the freezer some marijuana chocolate, and she called me on the phone, and I was like, oh my goodness. And then when I went to her, I realized the only thing that I could really do for her was let her just ride out the process. So to be a loving witness and to be with someone when they're having anxiety around the experience is very, very important and helpful, so thank you.
And one thing I forgot to say is that this space is not just for psychedelic crisis, it's for any kind of crisis, because a festival is a very intense environment, so there are a lot of things that can go wrong. Even, I fought with my friends and now I don't know where to go or what to do. Sit with us, we'll have a talk, make you a cup of tea, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anthony.
Okay. Now I was told I had less time, but you just gave me 2 more minutes. Yes, they okayed it. That's like the U.S. Congress. They yield 2 minutes to the guy on the other side of the aisle. So I have 22 on the clock. Still going to be a challenge. See?
But I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to cut you off early anyway.
No, 22. So real quick, we're going to move fast. I want to get through a lot. We're not going to get through it all. And thank you for the comment about the hype. You saved me some minutes there. It really is a big conversation. Separating the science from the hype. And how do we drop these experiences and the drugs, and there's a different thing sometimes, into our cultures in a safe way, when for thousands of years they were part of sacred containers or frameworks? Is medicalization the only way? Are there other ways? It's really a complicated question, and we can maybe get to it later. There are 3 models of therapy you've all read about probably. The psychedelic model is what I do, and that was based on the research in the 1960s in the early days. The goal is to give a high enough dose to generate that peak or mystical or numinous experience, the one I described earlier, for the studies that we're doing with end of life. The goal is to trigger that experience. Psycholytic was a model back when the drugs were legal in the 60s that people used as an adjunct to their psychotherapy or psychoanalysis to facilitate unconscious content into the psychotherapeutic process. Microdosing is a new model we've heard about in the last couple of years, probably $1 billion industry, and I'll use my daughter's word, buzzkill. When you bring people down, this is going to be a buzzkill line, but I got to stay in my scientific lane. There is no evidence as of to date that microdosing is an effective approach, at least when it comes to studies comparing it to an SSRI or to a placebo. There's been no significant difference. Now maybe there'll be a study at someday to show it is, but we want to separate science, what we find, from Well, it might be anecdotal, right? So that's that. So real quick, those are the old days. This is the first end-of-life studies and mystical experience studies. The guy with the trench coat, Albert Hofmann, great person. He synthesized by accident LSD. In the middle is Walter Pahnke, who did all the early spirituality studies and the cancer studies. The woman who looks like she's a square is the coolest lady on the planet. That was the lady who devised, her name's Helen Bonney, the playlist, the musical playlist for people on the experience. So I'll talk later how we do the sessions. They're wearing headphones for 6 hours, playing an arc of music to parallel the trajectory of the journey. And she put the songs together, and we still use many of those today. Let me get to one of the studies we did at NYU with cancer patients with 1 dose of psilocybin. And there's more studies coming out. We have a new one starting in a few months that I'm very excited about. So this trial looked at 1 dose of psilocybin with people with advanced cancer. 1 or 2 were in remission, but had crippling anxiety. I'm going to first read a few lines from some of their experiences. One of the beautiful parts of this research is we ask all the participants when they go home that night to write as much as they can about the experience. Just keep writing. We've published those in qualitative papers, and they're quite beautiful. I'm going to read you a few lines from some of the papers, and I'm going to read you more vignettes later. Some of these people have since passed away. Many of them have died, actually. One person wrote, "This changed my life. I can't imagine it," referring to her fear of cancer. "I felt this constant state of becoming. I felt gratitude like never before. I felt totally welcome. Death doesn't matter from a person who's about a year away from dying. I'm less afraid of death. Death is part of life. No fear of recurrence." That was one person who was in remission but was crippled with fear and couldn't leave her home. That one is eternal. All of existence happens in every moment. We talked about that sense of past, present, and future collapsing into the present moment. So this moment feels like everything. And we know that's reality. Physics have shown that. Einstein said that. We know time, past, present, and future is a bit of an illusion. And everything is love. We're going to have time later because you gave me 2 more minutes, so I love you. We're going to have 2 more minutes at the end to talk about love because we hear this a lot. I'm a scientist going around giving lectures everywhere, and I'm talking about love. And I could show you 1,000 graphs, and I'm going to show you a few on the science, but when we ask them, why are you changed, a lot of the answer is because I tapped into something very special. A loving kindness towards myself, and a forgiveness for where I fell short in life, or I didn't do so well. A loving kindness for other people in my life. And many people speak about I like to use the Greek word agape, but they speak about some larger sense of love or gratitude for whatever this universe is, wherever we are, that whatever is holding it together is like love. And we hear it all the time in all the trials. We looked at a lot of measures, anxiety, depression. I can't go through them all right now. I'll show you some of the results in a second. So how do we do this therapy? Well, people are screened carefully. So the first step is really a screening, and people of a medical or a psychiatric exclusionary criteria are ruled out. And maybe we'll get to that later. Once they're included and they sign consent, there's a preparatory phase that's really important. And we spend a number of sessions, two therapists or 2 facilitators, getting to know them. Now, I can't predict what's going to happen in their experience. But we can administer to them verbally, we can encourage them the guidelines how to go into the experience. And the main point is that whatever's arising in this altered state, whatever's coming up in consciousness, move into it, accept it, engage it. It's coming up in your mind, your consciousness, whatever that is, and we don't know what consciousness is. To engage it, ask it, why are you here? How can I learn from you? Be curious. You're safe. We're watching your body. We're taking your blood pressure. You're safe. Your body is safe. Go with it. Set and setting, the person's mindset, who they are matters, how it's done matters. Every session can have a very, very, very difficult stretch of time where it's very challenging. But people go home that night fine. That's not always the case if you take high-dose LSD in a parking lot at a rave from a 17-year-old kid. So how it's done and the supportive atmosphere matters versus the randomness that some people take it and have bad experiences. Intention matters. Why am I doing it? What's my goal? That matters. And we say trust. Trust yourself. Trust consciousness. Trust who you are. Trust the therapist in the room. Let go and be open to everything that's arising. Like you would in a meditation. Everything that's coming up. Even dark things. Even death itself. So if someone says to us, well, if death comes up, what should I do? We're going to say, go ahead and die. Because I promise you, you're not going to die on the couch this day, but there may be some powerful experience of kind of a psychological, spiritual death that you will come through. And there's a term called ego death or death rebirth experiences. Then we have the medication session. It's typically about 8 hours. 6 hours is really the activity of the drug, 6 more or less. For the most part, they wear eye shades and headphones playing this music. They can always sit up, always take them off if they need to, go to the restroom. But they're mainly laying down on the couch. I'll show you the room. 2 facilitators there the entire day to help them if they need us. In some sessions, there's no talking. That's the ideal. They're going into the experience, into their interior. And whatever that is helping them cultivate insight. If they need us to get through a difficult stretch of time, we will be there for them. We prepare them in advance for dark experiences. If that happens, how to get through it. We have techniques to help them. Then there's weeks of integration. Talking about what happened. Integration matters in so many ways. And in some ways, you want to apply what you learned or what came up in your real life. So if something came up about an estranged relationship and that person is still around, well, then maybe you want to go and address that with that person. That's the room where that study took place. It's a beautiful room, like a living room setting, but it's in a hospital. So that's the point, to make it a supportive, comfortable setting. And the main goals of the therapists or facilitators, we want to support the unfolding experience they're having in the best ways we can. You're safe. We're here for you if you need us. But as best you can, let go into the experience, even when it gets very difficult. And it can get very, very, very challenging. But know that you will move through it. And by going directly into the difficult stretch, I've rarely, I want to say never, but maybe I shouldn't say never. I rarely have seen where it didn't move into a teachable moment, to an insight. But by running from it, it could only induce more fear. By going into it, insight, and maybe some teachable experience. So some research, so the blue line on top didn't come out because of the blue background, the way it's being shown here. Okay, so see those white boxes where there's no line? There's a line there, you can't quite see it, but imagine a line going through there. So in this study, we gave them high-dose psilocybin and a placebo, and thank you, Nikos, talking about placebos. And we measured the difference of those two. Then the person who got placebo was able to get psilocybin. So everyone got psilocybin eventually, and the lines kind of merged. But I'm going to show you the difference between psilocybin and the placebo. So, do I have a pointer here? Yeah, so here is this red vertical line is the day of the administration of the drug. This pink bar is the placebo, is the psilocybin group. And you see immediately this score, which is the depression score, drops very low here. And you can't see it, but what those white boxes are is the placebo line. Now those white numbers on top are called effect sizes, and they're really very large. We rarely see that in psychotherapy research. That's a very significant difference. Another anxiety and depression scale. Again, you can't see the top line, but you can see the box there. Try to imagine a line going through there. You can see a little bit. These are very, very large differences. We woke up the next day and made the front page of the New York Times, which was a surprise. Another depression scale. This is very important. We talked about demoralization. It's really hard to treat demoralization. It's really hard to treat loss of meaning, hopelessness, helplessness. But look, the pink bar is the psilocybin group. The blue is the placebo. Look how immediately demoralization dropped, as did hopelessness. Now, in our upcoming study, we're going to have 5 medical centers participate. We're going to make demoralization what's called the primary variable. It's going to be the main part of the study. Because that syndrome of demoralization is really what's so painful, and we can't treat it. The only treatment we have, and it's still, is meaning-making psychotherapy, but this showed a dramatic drop. I don't have time for that, but it's incredible. These drugs are relatively safe medically, biologically, but there are risks. And heart rate and blood pressure can escalate. So people with cardiac conditions, arrhythmias, will be excluded from the trial. Walter Pahnke was the first guy I showed you earlier, the picture of him. He wrote back then, this is back in the 60s, if the use of psychedelic psychotherapy for the dying patient ever should be widespread, there'd be probably a change in our whole approach toward death. There might be less fear and more acceptance of this part of the life process. Now look at this. 4.5 years later, we contacted the surviving members. So about 2/3 had died. We re-administered the measures, the questionnaires. At 4.5 years, anxiety and depression were still reduced. So it was sustained. And this is really significant. At 4.5 years later, demoralization, hopelessness, still down to the level that after the day of the drug session. So whatever's happening is being sustained for years in this trial. And with all respect to my neuroscientific colleagues, it's important that we know what the brain is doing. But I think there's a risk of biological reductionism when we only talk about the brain science and don't talk about what's happening in the consciousness. It is fascinating. How does the brain do this? What's more fascinating for me is what is consciousness? How is the mind doing this? Where is it doing this? Where are we? And that's what's really important here. 4 minutes plus 2. Some more results. 70% rated it the top most meaningful experience of my lifetime. 90%, the most spiritually significant. This trial, when it was done, we showed a dramatic reduction and a sustained reduction in depression, anxiety, demoralization, hopelessness, an enhancement of existential well-being, improvement in quality of life. And here it is. The better results, the more significant results, were correlated with a mystical experience. That was a predictor of the more robust results. Now, it doesn't mean without that experience they weren't having good results. There's lots of experience you could have on a psychedelic. But that was being linked with these results. This is Patrick. He was one of my first patients. He was a lovely guy. He was 50 years old. He died a year after he came into the trial. He was a great guy, and I miss him. He's actually in Michael Pollan's book. When Michael wrote that book, he asked us for some vignettes, and I introduced Michael to Patrick's wife. And Patrick had a horrible cancer of the bile ducts and a really vicious chemotherapy. This is about a week before he died. He looks pretty good. He was skinny and sick in his body, but he was full of life. I want to read to you part of his journal entry that night. 4 minutes plus 2. Keep an eye on it. From here on, love is the only consideration. Everything that happened, anything and everything that was seen or heard, centered on love. It was and is the only purpose. Love seemed to emanate from a single point of light. It was pure, the sheer joy, the bliss indescribable. In fact, I have no words to accurately capture my experience, my state, this place. I know I've had no earthly pleasure that's come close to this feeling. He had a great marriage, he had a great job, really had a great life. He goes on and on about how we waste so much time on all the bullshit. He talks about love a lot. He had an experience, and a lot of people do, where they go into their body and see the inside of their body. He went in and he saw the cancer in his lungs. He had metastatic cancer by this point. I thought about my cancer. I took a tour of my lungs. I recall seeing what was happening in there by breathing deeply. There were nodules there, but they seemed unimportant. I was being told, without words, to not worry about the cancer. It's minor in the scheme of things. The more important thing is love. And it goes on and on. The narratives we're seeing with the results have been very poignant. I'm not going to have time to read them all for you today. This quote here, this line here, he laid down on the study that day, put the eye shades on, headphones, he's laying down, very quiet. As Nico said, it's double blind, meaning we don't know what he took, he doesn't know what he took. 2 hours go by, nothing's happening, very quiet, very peaceful, the music, we're all sitting there. I'll never forget, 11 o'clock on the dot, he begins to cry and he says, birth and death is a lot of work. And that night when we spoke again, and the next morning, he said that was the start of this incredible journey. He died as good as you can die when you're 50. Didn't want to leave his lovely wife and this gift we have here called life, but he was in a much better place than he'd come into this study. The great Thich Nhat Hanh said, our true nature is the nature of no birth and no death. Only when we touch our true nature can we transcend the fear of non-being, the fear of annihilation. Rumi, the wound is where the light enters you. So yesterday there was some talk about joy and sadness. I want to go through a Greek word, katamolipi. Who knows katamolipi? Greece. Come on, I'm in Athens. Alexandria, 5 points. This is a term used at Easter time. And this is, to me, how characterizes the experience of these sessions. It's translated as joyful mourning, joyful sorrow. It's as if every moment is, if you think about it, full of unspeakable suffering, but also unspeakable joy and love. It's all here. And what is the goal of life? To somehow move through with equanimity, navigating the difficulty of life, but also the incredible transcendent joy. And people are always crying on the study for different reasons, but it's that capacity to kind of engage the fullness of life with each step, and this term really kind of hits it for me. We're doing a new study. Well, we're done. It'll be published soon, hopefully. We gave psilocybin to religious leaders in more religions, including the Eastern Orthodox. And I can't talk about the results, but hopefully you'll see them soon. I even went to Mount Athos, I've been to Mount Athos, but I went to Jerusalem. Look at that. So my beard is not as good as those guys, but we talked about this study, and that's the Patriarch of Jerusalem. Oh, man.
Okay.
Yep, you got 2 minutes, real quick. There's a place in Mount Athos called, there's a monastery, St. Paul's Monastery. There's an inscription above the door. If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. If we could taste death before we die, maybe we're better prepared to die when we actually die. Kenneth Ring researches near-death experiences. Someone asked me before about near-death experiences. That's when people have a cardiac death and then resuscitated. We're doing research comparing the experiences. Kenneth Ring says, of all the things they tell him, it's about love. Same thing we hear. And my question for all of you is, why? Why is near-death experiences, psychedelic, spontaneous, natural? What is it about us being human that has the capacity to have these meaning-making experiences? Is there a purpose? Is it some Darwinian thing that just keeps us together and keep going? Or is there something else there about our true nature? And finally, it's not just spiritual practices. Astronauts have this effect. Who knows the overview effect? So we know, if you Google it, you'll see a lot of documentaries. Some astronauts have a full-blown mystical experience when they see the moon like that. As my hero Carl Sagan calls it, the pale blue dot. On Apollo 14, Apollo. Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, on the way back to Earth, looking out the window, seeing the sun, the moon, the stars, full-blown peak experience. He talks about it. You can Google it. We're wired for meaning. Look at that. Look at our home. Okay, implications, a lot of things, how we die. We could scientifically study the phenomenology of the experiences, PTSD, depression, a host of indications, interreligious implications, interspiritual.
Okay. I'm going to call it.
Consciousness is?
I'm going to call it. I'm actually going to call it.
And are we wired for meaning, and if so, why? Go ahead.
We're going to come back. There's so much to say. There's so much to discuss. There's so much to share. We're going to come back, and you all can ask questions, and you can all talk about the things that you were unable to talk about. But this is me being the moderator, taking my space, reclaiming my space and time. We will break for lunch. Before we do that, I did want to bring your attention to two books. One is called The Road to Eleusis, which is a very beautiful book, and it's by Gordon Wasson, and it's very interesting about the mysteries, about psychedelics potentially, and also Brian Mararescu, who was with us last time, also has a book, The Immortality Key, and I invite you to also look up Brian. So we'll break for lunch, and then we'll come back, and we'll have open discussion.